Hi. Hi. Welcome to my YouTube channel. So today's topic is a 350-year-old book that I've read, and I want to share some thoughts about that. So the name of the book is The Rudiments of English Grammar. It was written by British polymath Joseph Priestley, and it was first introduced in 1761. So it's a 350-year-old book. So the introduction is over, so let's just dive into it. I have 40 different points, important points that I would like to share about. The first point is the way they used to write S. The way we write S was different from the way they write S. They had a different type of S. It was kind of like F, but it was not properly F. It was called the soft S. In the beginning of a sentence, it was introduced as a short S written like an F. If it was a double, used double consecutively, then the first one would be written like the soft S and the second one would be written as the normal S. As we can see in the example, the here and the here is. The example here is completely demonstrates that the second S is as the normal S that we use, and the first S of that here is the soft S. So going to our next example, Y as vowel. We don't use Y as vowel, but in this book it said that Y also sometimes can be used like vowel. As normally we use vowel, and those are A, E, I, O, U, 5 normal vowels, but sometimes Y can be used like a vowel and having the same sound as I. Then it was very interesting for me that the definition I was introduced in this book, the definition of a word, it was really mesmerizing. The given definition is any number of letters which together give a distinct sound, make a syllable, and several syllables are generally used to compose a word. It was really mind-blowing to me. The definition was completely dazzling, and I really like the definition of a word. Just imagine a number of letters together forming a distinct sound with some syllables making a syllable, and make several syllables are generally used to compose a word. I really like that definition. Going to our next example, etc. The way we use etc. and the way they used to use etc. So the history of etc., if you Google it, it is that etc. abbreviated to etc, etc, or and C is a Latin expression that is used in English to mean and other things. So when we want to mean and other things, we want to give that expression that there are other things like this which we are not going to mention, but there are those things, we use etc. And in the past, like 350 years ago, they used to write and C. That was the short form. Like we use now etc instead of etc, they used to write and C. Going to our next example is adjective is not only for noun and pronouns. The definition of adjectives is quite mesmerizing here. We can see that what are adjectives? Adjectives are words that denote the prepositor qualities of things. So it's said things. In the normal definition that we see nowadays in several books are what are adjectives? Adjectives are the definition or the quality of noun and pronouns. But in the older books, we can see that adjective not only can be for noun or pronoun, it can also modify other adjectives. In this case, adjective is not only for noun and pronoun. The other hand, adjective can properties of qualities of things, and those can be anything. Obviously not a verb, but besides verb, it can be everything. So now, moving from adjectives, our next example we can see how many participles has a verb. So we didn't use has. What we use is had. H-A-T-H. It is quite different from what we use has. So let's see how it is different. We can see in from the definition of Collins Dictionary, had is the old-fashioned third-person singular form of the verb have. Brave new world that hath such economics in it. Collins Cobalt Advanced Learner's Dictionary. So we see that in the past we had a different alternative for have, and that was had. But now we don't use that. Going to our next example, we had a alternative for do and does. That was dot, D-O-T-H. It was quite surprising to me that there was an alternative for does also, and that was dot. So in the next example of number 8, extinction of hath. He hath or he has. It was after all extinct. Just imagine something. It was normal just 350 years ago. We are using English for a very long time, but just 350 years ago, when this guy was writing this book, he was very familiar with it, and everybody around him used this word instead of has. They used hath, H-A-T-H. They used to use it. But nowadays, if you write the hath anywhere, if you say hath anywhere, nobody is going to understand. There will be very few people in this world who will be able to recognize that. See how dramatically language changes? That doesn't happen for scientific things and other stuffs like that, but it happens for languages. Okay, now conjunctive where. So it was something that I knew, but in the present tense we use I was, he was, and in the conjunctive form, which is a situation, an abstract situation that we are thinking, we are wishing for. If it would happen, I wish. In these type of situations, those are imaginary. In these kinds of imaginary situations, you always have to use were. You are never allowed to use was or something like that. You have to use were. If I were a king, it's not if I was a king. If I were a king, if I were a king, if thou wert, if he were, if we were, if ye were, if they were. So in every sentence, every cases, if it's an imaginary situation that you are not familiar with, you're thinking, you're wishing, imaginary situations, you have to use the conjunctive form, which is were. Going to our next example. So it was participle present, which was being, hearing. So it was quite different for me, something like we don't hear quite often, being, hearing. We obviously use being heard most of the times, but being, hearing is something like that we really don't use, but it's grammatically correct. I believe that is the essence of reading such an old book like this, that we know which is grammatically correct, not only from kinds of literature or our constructions. We can use these kinds of reference book, very old reference books, and know how grammar was formed. Like being, hearing, it's also correct till this day, but we don't use that much. And according to Gemini, that Google artificial intelligence, being, hearing is not grammatically correct. We can see that the phrase being, hearing is not grammatically correct in standard English, and here's why. The artificial intelligence has a list of reasons why this is not correct, but it is although correct, it has a grammatical reference, but we in this standard English, just after 350 years, we don't use it anymore, and that is why it is not standardized, and that's why we're saying that it's incorrect. But it was completely okay just a couple of hundred years ago. Then introduction to compounds. it was kind of something I like, that absolute, three kinds of absolutes and present tense. The first one is I shall be hearing, the second was I have been hearing, and the third was I shall have been hearing. If you pay attention, you can see that there's a difference between first compound, the second compound, and the third compound. The first one we name as the first double compound. The second one, the next one, is the second double compound, and the last one is the triple compound. And how is it compound and how much? Look at the examples. I shall be hearing. So only has one compound. I shall be hearing. I have been hearing is the second, and that's why it has the second double compound. I have been hearing, and the last has the most compound in it, and it is called the triple compound, and which is I shall have been hearing. Okay, then the second double compound participle present is having been hearing. That is also something that we don't use particularly anymore, but still is grammatically correct because it has a grammatical reference. It has a very strong grammatical reference, I'd argue. The style of secondly and thirdly. Have you ever wondered that why we write one st to write first, two nd to write second? Check out their full form. First, first, that st is taken into the first. Second, second, that nd is taken to write the abbreviation of second. And that is why we had first and second written like that. Here we can see how we can also use secondly and thirdly. We can write 2 dly, that will represent secondly. We can write 3 dly, and that is going to represent thirdly. Although I would not recommend anyone to do this in their journals or something like that. That is not officially approved by the manuals like Chicago manuals or American manuals, and that is why I believe it is grammatically correct. You can argue about it that it is grammatically correct, but you cannot use it because it's not standardized English anymore. Although if you are a linguist, you have a very strong argument why this is correct to do. Then, distinction of adverbs and adjectives. We can see an adverb admits of the personal pronouns before it. He loves, they love. Pronouns have enumerated. Adverbs do all. Most of them an answer to some of these questions: how much, when, or where. When the answer gives no word that is known by the preceding rules to be a substantive or an adjective. It was very clear. I love that they give the very simple solution of definition of an adverb, and if it's not an adverb answers questions, and the questions are how much, when, and where. If these four questions are not answered and you have a word, that has to be an adjective, because we learned earlier that adjective is something that modifies things, that describes things. It is not for nouns or pronouns, it describes things. So most of the words are adjectives, and you have a very distinctive definition of adverbs, and you can recognize a verb or recognize a word if it's an adverb or not. And when you are able to do that, when you find new words that aren't adverbs, you know that those are adjectives. So the 15, use shall and will. This is very important. We don't find this classical explanation of when to use will and when to use shall. When we simply foretell, we use shall in the first person and will in the rest, as I shall or he will write. Now our number 15 example, which is the use of shall or will. It is very difficult to find the reason why we are using either shall or will, and when should we use will and when should we use shall. It is not pretty common understanding that we basically have. Most of us really don't know when we should use shall and when should we use will. Let's see the example. When we simply foretell, we use shall in the first person and will in the rest. So if it's first person like I am going to use shall, and all the rest like you, he, she, they, in all those cases I am going to use will. But there's a catch. But when we promise something, threaten something, we threat someone or engage in something, in those cases we use will in the first person and shall in the rest. So let me make it clear to you. In normal cases, I shall and everyone will. And in the cases where I promise, I threaten, or I engage in something, then in that case I will and everyone shall. Like everyone shall promise and I will write. He shall write and as I will. So I hope this is clear from now. Our next example is dot. The dot was previously introduced and I've said simple things about dot, but I didn't go much further, and even at this time I'm not going to go much further, but let's just see. In what manner doth the exact auxiliary verb to have determine the time of any action? It's do, right? It's just do. We can see in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, in the online version, we can see that dot is still there. So they had the record of the use of dot because it was so common at that time. Archaic present tense of third person singular of do. So instead of using do, people at that time just use dot. As simple as that. Going to our next example, that adjectives being dependent and sitting after substantive. So in what cases is the adjective placed after the substantive? When a clause of a sentence depends upon the adjective, as a man generous to be to his enemies, feed me with food convenient for me. So just let it sink in our heads. So in what cases the adjective placed after the substantive? So the adjective which defines, that is placed after. Normally adjective is placed before. It is before, but in this case it follows the substantive. So let's see. When a clause or a sentence depends on the adjective, when a clause or that sentence is depending on that adjective, depends upon that adjective, at that case the adjective is going to sit after the substantive. As in the example we can see, feed me with food convenient for me. The word convenient is the adjective. Like the food, how much, what type of food that is. It could be harsh type of food, it could be rotten food. It's convenient food, right? So the adjective is sitting after. Why? Because the sentence, the clause is dependent on the adjective, and that's why this is happening. Our 18th example is ellipsis. Ellipsis, maybe this is the correct pronunciation because I have never ever in my life heard this word before. The omission, just look how they used that s, because it looks like omission and it's omission. The omission of a word necessary to grammatical propriety is called ellipsis. 12 o'clock, that's an example. We can see that at 12 o'clock, that means off the clock. Have you ever wondered that when you say that 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, what does that mean? O'clock, off the clock. It was ellipsis. It was very common, so that they wanted to remove it. Something in grammatical reasons, when it becomes very common, that even after you remove it, people are going to understand and it's going to make some sense. In those cases, we just remove that. So going to our next example, it's word news as plural. The word news, also used both in singular and plural number. we can have an example that singular number seems to be more common and is therefore to be preferred. I want to mark it a little bit. I want to put emphasis on it. If you open the modern day grammar books, they will say that news is a singular word and always use it as a singular word. Sorry for that sound. News is a singular word, always use this as a singular word. That is you're going to find in the modern grammar books. Just 350 years ago, they used to say that news can be used both in singular and plural, although they prefer news as a singular word, and after 350 years, it took a long time, but after that, it became so normal that now news is a singular word, and over again is confusing the word with verb. I don't know why, but it's just sometimes happens, and I really don't have that much time that I'm going to create the videos in a way that I can edit those, because I have to manage all the lighting, all the things, and I want to put emphasis on the content rather on how I'm representing the content. I want to put emphasis on the content that looks good, right? So let's check our 20. In hope versus in hopes. So what's the correct? What should we say? In hope or in hopes? So in hopes or in hope, and in the very same sense. So it doesn't matter that you say in hope, I am in hope, or I am in hopes. In both of the cases, you're grammatically correct, and it's a book referencing this from 350 years, so you are okay with it. Good. Let's check our next example. That is 21, number 21, that is antecedent. So you must have heard antecedent before. If you ever gone through some basic grammars, you have obviously heard about antecedents. I'm sorry for the mispronunciation. So let's jump in. The writer gave a very simple and very profound definition of antecedents. I really liked it. The pronoun it is sometimes used at the same time with the word for which it might have been substituted, and even precedes it, and that is called antecedent. So what is an antecedent? To answer what is an antecedent, we have to know what is a pronoun. I believe that we all know that what is a pronoun. A pronoun is a substitute for a noun. Like I have someone and I want to substitute of that person, that word, I'm using a pronoun because I don't want to use that name again. It's like my name is Sulove, so Sulove has done this, Sulove has done that. So rather than saying Sulove twice, I can say that Sulove has done this, he has done that. That he represents Sulove. And the third time, when I'm substituting that he, it is called antecedents, and that I can use it like it. And antecedents are mostly used like for children. We say that it for children, or it is used for low qualities of animals. Yeah, that is how it is used. What could I do, right? There's nothing I can do. The next example, the 22, pronouns as antecedents. So not only things but also persons may be antecedent to this pronoun. Who is it? It is not Thomas. Who is the person? Is not he Thomas? So we can see that pronouns can also use as antecedents. The 23, using it instead of he in conversations. Being substituted for he only in conversation. So I liked it that it was mentioned that it is only used in conversations. and nobody actually sees your conversations. You can see whatever you like in conversations and nobody writes that down. So in normal conversation you can use being substituted for he only in conversations. So, but please don't do it in written places. 24. His self. His self. H-I-S space and then S-E-L-F. Self. His self. We don't use his self, although I never see anyone using his self together. And you might be seeing H-I-S and a F. No, that's a soft S. So H-I-S-S-E-L-F. That is his self. I want to show you something. I forgot to take a picture, but his self is also available in the online, in the internet. So if you go there and search, I believe that you will be able to find it. So the number 25, derivation of awkward. You can see the spell awkward in the book Rudiments of English Grammar, A-U-K-W-A-R-D. So obviously you know that this is not the spelling of awkward. Awkward is spelled A-W-K-W-A-R-D. So the U-K become W-K, right? This is something that happened over time. It took 350 years to awkward become awkward. And if you search in the internet, you will not find this old spelling. I tried searching and I didn't find. Although if you search, if you go through old literatures, you would obviously find them. Let's go to our 26, that is one page to another page formality. I really liked it. You can see in the example that from the one page to the next page, that word is used twice. So property A, more, and the thing is that more is used on the second page. So there was no need for you to use more in the first page, but that was a kind of formality that used. And really I want to say that it is very helpful. Because of this, you can see that did you skip 2-3 pages or not. You can obviously see that, because when you have seen that, okay, the next line, the next page is going to start from more, you know the word that the next page is going to start from more. And if you don't see more, you know that you perhaps skipped 2-3 pages or something happened, right? So it's pretty helpful. I've seen it. Going to our next example, the 27th, Ice Age Grammarians. I named it Ice Age Grammarians because in this book he said that by the old grammarians, and said something about grammar. But old grammarians, bro, this guy is writing in the 1700s. So this is nearly a 400-year-old book, and that was kind of ridiculous to me that he just didn't knew that one day someone is going to laugh at this thing, that there were like Ice Age grammarians, so old grammarians. Just imagine, you see that old grammarians in a 350-year-old book. So how old were they? And going to methink. It's something that still exists today, and the word is methink. You can see an example: methinks, methought, and methots. I don't think any of my viewers ever used methink or methoughts in written language. Although you can see that this methinks is in the dictionary from Oxford. In the Oxford dictionary you can find methinks. So you can use methinks, you can use methoughts, and you can use methinking, and you don't need to give a space in between them. Although if you give a space, the meaning changes a little bit. So the 29th is than he. Than he or than him. You are taller than he, not taller than him, because at full length it would be you are taller than he is. In this case, It's quite easy. Rather saying you're taller, not taller than him, we use that you're taller than he. Why is that? That we say that you are taller than he. The full form is you are taller than he is. That's a complete sentence, but the is ellipted. Ellipsis. I've already introduced that we are omitted, where the omission of is happening, that auxiliary verb is taken away, and we are left with you are taller than he. The is gone. And the next, then 13th example we have then I versus then me. Let me tell you something, this is one of the most disputed topics of English grammar, that it is going to be then I, he is taller than I, or he is taller than me. It's very disputed. And if you go through Google or search in the internet, you'll find a definition, or you'll find a reason that is then a conjunctive or is then a preposition. If then is used as a preposition, then it's going to be me, because the me is the object of then, if you consider then as a preposition. On the other hand, if you consider then as a conjunctive, then I is to be used, because you have to use that he is taller than I, because I is an understandable verb and it has your differentiating that, because then is a conjunctive, you're using it. But that's the dispute. Grammarians never settle on that then is a preposition or then is a conjunctive. Although I have a very simple example here that's given that so greater than me will be more grammatical than greater than I. As simple as that. He didn't went so far, he just said that taller than me is more grammatical than taller than I. So taller than I is correct, but if you use taller than me, it's more grammatical, it's more formal, and the choice is obviously yours. And we going to the 31st example, 31st example actually, whom versus who. So when should we use whom and when should we use who? Whom do you think me to be? But in conversation we always hear who do you think me to be. So that's the thing. In written, in these kinds of places, you're going to use whom when you're known one to someone, that who is that person, and who do you think me to be? Who do you think me to be? And in conversation we are going to use instead of who. And we are going to our 32nd example, and that is hang versus hung. Whenever I want to share a very personal habit, that whenever there's two things, I'm always confused amongst them, and that one of that things is hang and hung. Which is which? The example is giving a man is hanged, but the coat is hung up. So you cannot hang a coat and you cannot hung a man. Although you can hung a man, but so we hung coats. So your coat is hung or hung up. It's not hung but hung up, and a man executed is called a man is hanged. Brought to death. So hence we use, going to the 33rd example, that is hence, thence and whence. We obviously used hence, but did we use ever thence and whence? Those are there and those are still usable. You can use hence, thence and whence. So I believe that this new two words in your dictionary is going to help you a lot. Going to our 34th example, tricky question using not. Just see what's in there. Are you not disposed to take a walk? If I be disposed to walk, I say yes. If not, I say no. So in this kinds of situation, you have to observe the question and then answer accordingly, that which one is the best. In the question we can see, are you, in the first, that is not marked, but in before the red line, are you disposed to take a walk? Are you disposed to take a walk? If yes, that means you're disposed. In the next, the red line, are you not disposed to take a walk? And no to that question is that you're not disposed, so you can walk. So it is a little bit tricky. If you focus a little bit, it's gonna be easy. The 35th example, that would have been. So that would have been, I don't really use that would have been. That would have been. Perhaps you might be using this in conversation, but you're confused about the usage of this in written English. But congratulations to you, you can obviously use that would have been, and there's no problem in it.